Hello learners, I am Dr. Subodh Kisharwani working with Indira Gandhi National Open University. The topic which I am going to talk today is method of sampling part 2, which revolves around non-random sampling. I think in our preceding two sessions, if you recapitulate yourself or visit the Facebook live link, you will find out that the first session was talking about the sampling, and when we have talked about the sampling, we talk about how the sampling is quite important when we talk about the research, when we talk about collection of data, or when we talk about interacting with the respondents, because there are certain methodologies which are going to play a very important role. And then afterwards we have talked about the methods of sampling, and talk about the first part which talks about the random sampling, or rather we can say the probability sampling. So in this probability sampling we have covered the various aspects, that how the probability sampling differs from non-probability sampling, or the random sampling differs from the non-random sampling. So today's session talks about the non-random sampling, which is also one of the important ingredients as far as the collection of data is concerned, as far as the sampling is concerned. So anyway, prior to going into the depth of this topic, let's quickly recapitulate ourselves what we have done in our preceding session, and what exactly the points which had been taken care, so that the blocks can be built, and gradually we can mug up the concept related to research, or the research methodology, or the statistical analysis. So the very first lecture was talking about the curtain raiser to research, which usually talks about what exactly the research is, and how research is going to play a very important role as far as the academicians are concerned, as far as the academia is concerned, as far as the corporate world is concerned, or the present trade and commerce is concerned. Because everywhere research is coming up in a big way, and we have observed that there was a time when research was confined to the university systems, or to the academic institutions, or the research institutions, but now it had crosses the boundaries, and everywhere you find out, even the most omnipresent thing which the corporates are doing right now, it's doing the research of the consumers, or knowing about the behavior about the consumers. So we are not going more into the depth of it, because already we have a very thought-provoking sessions which can provide a link to the learners to go through into that. So then we have talked about the research thought, how research thoughts are coming, and how on the basis of the research thought you can build your future plan of action of research. Then there are certain FAQs which are going to play a very important role, like the frequently asked questions, that when we are going to do the research, when we are going to choose the title, or when we are going to formulate the objectives, or what could be the modus operandi behind that. So this whole research methods talks about that. Then we have research plan, research problem, because while starting your research, the certain problems comes into picture, and so the planning is going to play a very important role. And if you have planned the things in a very systematic manner, I think up to some extent you can resolve your way of doing the things. So then we have formulation of objectives, how the objectives can be framed. Then hypothesis was there, because this hypothesis is quite important, because when you are going to into the depth of the research, I think the first building block is to having a null hypothesis, or then you can work on the basis of these hypotheses, which can extract from the objectives which we used to do. So research design is there, then collection of data is there, which usually talks about sample, secondary data and primary data, and then sampling is there. So in our last to last session we have talked about the sampling, and the very last session was random sampling. So probability sampling is there. So now the very important thing is that why we go for sampling. This we have already talked about. This is a very important aspect, because universal and population is a very gigantic shape, and it's really cumbersome for the individual, for the researchers to go into the depth of all the population or the universal and come to the conclusion. So that is where the concept of the sampling comes, and the collection of sample comes into picture. So from there the things need to be come up, and then there are certain methodologies which are very important. And when you talk about the random sampling, we have already talked about the random sampling, and we have seen that how the bifurcation of random sampling is there, because the very important thing is that that random sampling talks about the sampling outlier. Outlier is a very important ingredient, because when we study the statistics, when we go into the depth of measure of central tendency, there we have a very stereotype methods, that is mean, median and mode, and these mean, median and mode lacks when the outlier comes, because when you go for the average in general are in certain intervals, or linked to one another. But sometimes what happens when you take an average, sometimes the figure comes like 5, 10, 15, and sometimes comes at 90. If you take an average of all three, I think the average could be somewhat differs. Whereas if you, so that 90 is nothing but an outlier because it is different from the other sample numbers which you have taken. So then you are going to apply the measure of central standard deviation or measure or dispersion or other way of doing things. So that is the model which is there, where when you are emphasizing more on the random sampling, I think the random sampling always emphasize on sampling outliers, which is somewhat lacking. So that is the reason, you know, we have to come out from there and we have to apply this non-probability sampling. So anyway, we are just going to throw a light on what exactly the non-random sampling is, because when you talk about the sampling, I think is a study or research involves a large number of population we have already talked about, and you see universe is at the top, then you have sensor, then you have sample population, then sample frame, and then from here you are going to take the elements or collect the data. So these are the points which we have already covered in our preceding sessions, and what could be the sample is, what are the essentials of good sample, then random sampling methods, and today we are going just focus on non-probability methods. So when you are going to talk about the probability methods, I think we have already talked about it's a random sampling, does not involve human judgment, requires sampling frame, and the methodologies are systematic, stratified, cluster, or the simple random sampling. Whereas when you talk about the non-probability methods, it is it involves human judgment and it has sampling frame required, and it is called the quota sampling, convenience sampling, judgment sampling, or this snowball sampling. So we are going to gradually talk about and distinguish how this probability sampling differs from non-probability sampling, because when you are going to talk about the probability sampling, I think if you see this particular image, this probability sampling is quite scattered in nature, whereas non-probability sampling is quite purposive in nature, and it is in a very systematic manner you are going to take. So somewhat the model is like that, whereas when you are going to talk about the probability sampling, you are not biased, whereas when you are going to talk about the this non-probability sampling, you are very much biased. So this is a thing which is there, and now we have got a very, very important comparison which can distinguish that what is the difference between, what is the actual difference between the probability sampling and non-probability sampling. And that is quite important, because once you are going to depth of non-probability sampling, there must be certain logic, there must be certain justification. If you are not going to provide the justification, I think somewhere you are going to lack, because what happened when we are in the process of collection of data or taking the sample or extracting the sample, I think this phenomena need to be understood in a very contemporary manner. So if you see, this probability sampling is a sampling technique in which the subjects of the population get an equal opportunity to be selected as a representative sample. We have seen in the cluster sampling, we have seen in the the stratified random sampling that we make certain strata, we make certain group, and from that group some of the representation need to be done. So there must be a model where equal opportunities need to be given, and there must be a representative from each sample. So that is the beauty of probability sampling, which we have studied elaborately in our preceding session. And if you talk about non-probability sampling, I think non-probability sampling is a method of sampling wherein it is known that which individuals from the population will be selected as sample, because so that could be the reason if you talk about probability sampling, it could be not biased, whereas non-probability sampling is quite biased, because it talk about the convenient sampling, or the judgmental sampling, or the quota sampling, or the snowball sampling, or purposive sampling. So everywhere you observe that you are quite familiar that you are going to collect the data from this manner, and that from this particular class and creed. So you are quite biased in that. And if you talk about the convenience sampling, you are for your convenience, like you are doing your research in Delhi or in particular state, so you have gone for the convenient sampling because you are residing to that particular state, and it would be easier for you to collect the data or collect the sample. So that could be the reason you are emphasizing more on convenience sampling. So and some certain times when we go more into the depth of the judgmental sampling or the snowball sampling, which is quite talking about a cross layer model where the reference is going to play a very important role. So that is the thing which is there. So alternatively known as random sampling, this is known as non-random sampling, and basis of selection is randomly, that is very true, and randomly you are going to select the content or the sample from if you're talking about the probability sampling. But if you're talking about non-random non-probability sampling or non-random sampling, you are arbitrarily taking the sample. So opportunity of selection is fixed and known, that is very true, and not specified and unknown. So research is conclusive, is very true, and end of the result, what you are going to get, you are going to get a very conclusive result, which is quite holistic in nature. Whereas when you are talking about non-probability sampling, it is quite exploratory. We will see there are certain methods like snowball, non-random sampling methods, which purely based on the reference. Like we will send the questionnaire to respondents and ask the respondents to provide a certain, the lead, and on the basis of that lead we can again, hit that particular respondents and ask certain questions from them. So this could be the modus operandi, which talks about that how the exploratory studies there, and these are quite consuming, and it's quite holistic in nature and takes into consideration, the time factor and other things. So results are unbiased and results are biased because you are quite, the example which I have quoted about, the convenience sampling, that you are, for your convenience, you are going and choosing the particular jurisdictions, and you know that if you go for other jurisdictions, maybe some different results will come, but it's really cumbersome for you to collect the data from different states. So since you have confined yourself to the particular jurisdiction, I think you are quite biased in that manner. So this is the model which is there, and methods are objective, that is very true. You are quite object oriented, whereas methods are subject oriented, and you could be quite subjective. And as far as the inferential inferences is concerned, as far as the thing is concerned, this probability sampling talks about the statistical way of doing the things, and non-probability sampling talks about the analytical way of doing the things. So here, the hypothesis need to be tested when you are going to talk about the probability sampling, whereas here the hypothesis need to be generated. So sometimes what happen, when you are applying the non-probability sampling, you get certain hypotheses which need to be generated, or it could not be an alternative hypothesis, but it can be a new kind of hypothesis which can again added in this list of hypotheses. So the impact of these kind of non-probability sampling is that somewhere after certain time, what you observe that your research could be lingered down in some of the cases. So anyway, we have very elaborately compared the term called this particular thing. So non-probability or non-random sampling is the process of selecting sampling from a population without using statistical probability theory. And if you talk about the non-probability sampling theory, each element or member of the population does not have an equal chance of being included in the sample, and the researcher cannot estimate the error caused by not collecting data from all elements member of the population. So that is where which is there. And if you go more into the depth of this non-probability sampling, I think it's quite purposive in nature, and that has to do with sampling addressing the question for research. And the research sample is qualitative type, and the probability sampling focus on external value for transferring of issues. And the very important thing is that the series and control of sample is non-probability random samplings typically smaller than 30 cases. Again, so in every juncture you will observe that you are quite biased and you are quite making the things as per your convenience, as per your need. So that could be the reason the result which used to come, it have a very short-sighted approach and not giving the very holistic view or the robust report. So non-probability sampling have numerous sample of size which is determined by the purpose of particular component, and this is using more rigid side estimation procedures. So when we are going to talk about the certain types of these judgmental, convenience, purposive or snowball or the quota sampling, we will see that how this non-random sampling differs from the random sampling and what are the USP behind that. So the methods are non-probability random sampling use wide range of sampling techniques. So the reason behind is quite clear that sometimes what happens, we are not in a position to collect the data or not getting an opportunity that respondents are reciprocating to us in that manner. So what exactly we are going to do? We are applying the certain methods which are quite important. So in general, we have 4 important ingredients which are part of non-probability sampling, that is convenience sampling, judgmental sampling, quota sampling and snowball sampling. So if we start with the non-probability sampling, I think this convenience sampling talks about the members of populations which are selected that are easily available for study. And if you talk about the quota sampling, samples generated by dividing the population into separate groups and selecting members from each group. that is non-representative quota. And like we are going to take a data of the male which is of 50 years, or taking the data of females of between 24 to 30 years. So we have restricted ourselves, so that could be the model by which the quota sample used to work. And when you're going to talk about the snowball sample, this sample in which members of the sample select further members for inclusion in the sample. So here what happened, we first float the information, float the questionnaire to respondents, and then ask the respondents to give us certain references. So this works with the in a model called multi-level marketing or network marketing, or the reference procedures, where if we interact with one person, the other person can give the reference of 3, and this could be the model. So while elaborately talking about this snowball sample, we will very easily view that how the things are going to be changed. And self-selecting purposive sample is there, in which member of population select themselves for inclusion in the sample. So anyway, I think this is another difference which talks about that how the things are going to be changed, and there are certain advantages, there are certain cost and degree, and there are certain disadvantages also. So if you talk about convenience, it's very low cost, extensively used. If you talk about judgment, it's moderate cost, average use. And if you talk about quota, moderate cost, very extensively used, and low cost used in special situations as far as the snowball model is concerned. So we start with the purposive sampling, and we will cover all the 5 heads which comes under the ambit of methods of sampling. As far as the non-random sampling is concerned, we see that this purposive sampling is quite biased in nature, and from the very beginning, you observe that that deliberately the person which had been taken, extracted, or the sample which need to be taken is quite biased. So this is called purposive sampling. We have populations, and purposive sampling is that we are biased, that we are going to take only the black color person as a sample. So we have taken only that only. So this is the model which is there. If you talk about snowball sampling, this is a chain referral sampling, and if you see this chain referral sampling, this chain referral works in the manner which I am talking about, that the multi-level marketing or the network marketing, where the chain is there. So while floating the sample to one person, now we have taken a reference of 2 person from this person, and these 2 person had given a reference of 3 more. So one person had given a reference of 3, other had given a reference of 3. Now from that 3 we have got the huge number of samples. So these are considered to be a mouth marketing model, or the way where we have seen and how the things are going to be moved. And snowball sampling or chain referral sampling is defined as a non-probability sampling techniques, and which have traits that are rare to find, and this sample technique in which existing subjects provide referrals to recruit samples. So, and this is sometimes quite important, and these sampling methods involves a primary data source nominating other potential data source. So what exactly we are doing, that when we formulate objectives, on the basis of objectives we frame the hypothesis, and on the basis of this hypothesis we frame the questionnaires, and then these questionnaires are sent to the respondents. And once the respondents reciprocates, then what exactly we are going to do, we can very easily know that the reciprocation is very less, the respondents are not reciprocating the manner they are supposed to do. So what exactly we are going to do in that case, we take a reference from these the respondents, that why not you can give us some more reference. So and this nominating other potential data source is there, and this snowball sampling method is purely based on referrals. That is very true, and it could be, and these referrals are coming in due course of the collection of primary data. It's not like that you are going to collect the data. So the respondents, the bona fide respondents to whom you have floated the questionnaires, they can give the references, or they can give the referrals. So these referrals are and when you are making a questionnaire, you should design a questionnaire in such a manner that in this particular questionnaire you are going to ask the referrals. So this snowball sampling is a popular business study method, and which is going on, the way things are going to be done, because the way e-commerce companies are going to do the research, or the other way of research is coming out. We have observed that this snowball sampling method is extensively used where population is unknown and rare, and it is tough to choose subjects to assemble them as a sample for research. So then we have observed that this convenience sampling is a different methods which talks about collecting data quickly and fewer rules to follow, and this is again inexpensive methodology and easy to do research. And this if you talk about the strength and weakness, because when we are going to do the sampling, we always do the SWOT analysis, that is strength, weakness, opportunity and threat. And when we check these two parameters, I think strength, this is low cost, time and administration, high participation and generalization, because as far as the convenience sampling is concerned, it's quite convenient. You can define the jurisdictions, you can define your population, and sometimes you can define your sample also. So what exactly we mean to say, if you talk about the weakness, it's generalizing subjects, ID, population, results depend on the characteristics of sample. So this convenience sampling is defined as a method adopted by researchers where they collect market research data from a conveniently available pool of respondents. So you have got a pool of respondents and you can very easily, as per your convenience, as per your pace, you can collect the data. So it is most common used sampling technique as it is incredible, prompt, uncomplicated and economical. So researchers use convenience sampling in situations where additional inputs are not necessary for the principal research, and the components of the population are eligible in dependence on the researcher's proximity to get involved in the sample. So we have seen that as far as the convenience sampling is concerned, we have seen that how the researcher had taken no purple figures in the sample. So he had just taken only the sample which is away from the purple colors. So this is the convenience sampling. So again, what I mean to say, when you are going to talk about the non-random sampling, it is quite biased in nature, because this is somewhat talking about the convenience. So select any member of the population who are conveniently and readily available, and then there are certain applications of convenience sampling. So convenience sampling is applied by brands and organizations to measure their perception of the image in the market. That is very true, because they can know about the brand loyalty, they can know about the usage or the behavior of the consumers vis-a-vis to particular product. So data is collected from potential customers to understand specific issues. So there is always a chance that randomly selected population may not accurately represent the population of interest, thus increasing the chance of bias. So anyway, I think if you talk about the judgmental sampling, which is again the fourth ingredient of this particular methods of sampling, which we usually call non-random sampling, I think this consumes minimum time for execution and directly approachable to respondents, because and almost real-time results are coming up. So that is the reason you observe that when any e-commerce company sold the product, they just put the badge on their portal, and the moment consumers log in the particular portal or do the e-commerce, it asks for what your experience related to the particular product which you have ordered 2 days back. So in that case, what we observe that this is considered to be going to give the real-time results and easy to conduct. It's quite easy to conduct because the moment consumer log in, I think the first the budge or the question comes from the e-commerce portal to the consumers that how you are going to what do you think about the product, and how we can enhance our services or other models. So this is the thing which is there. So another form of convenience sampling where participants are handpicked from the accessible population. Researchers select participants that are representative of the entire population, and very subjective sample method can be biased. So judgmental sampling is a form of convenience sampling, or we can say in which the population elements are selected and based on the judgment of the researchers. So sometimes again this is quite biased, and when you are going to compare with the random sampling, because in this case also as far as the final opinion is going to be considered, the researcher role is very important, and he is going to do the sampling as per his convenience and as per his judgment. So test markets, purchase engineers selected in industrial market research, expert witness used in court. So these are considered to be the judgmental sampling, and then you have got a quota sampling. So if you talk about the quota sampling, this it had also certain strength and weakness, and it's low cost, time and administration is involved, high participation and generalization, that is very true, and more representative of individual population. The example which I have quoted about choosing the teenagers who are between in the bracket of 15 to 18 years, or if you talk about weakness, generalizing subjects, ID, population, results depend on characteristics of sample and more time consuming. So one type of this is another type of non-probability sampling, and must begin with the matrix of target population characteristics, that is percentage males, percentage females, SES, etc. The set quota or percentage of each characteristic is fulfilled in the sample. So there are certain advantages again, because quota sampling means to take a very tailored sample and easy to administer, fast to create and complete, inexpensive, and takes into account population proportions if desired, and can be used if probability sampling techniques are not possible. So what we have observed that sometimes what happens, there are certain probability sampling which is not applicable. So in that case the quota sampling is going to be done. So this quota sampling is taken massively by the governments, and selection is not random. Selection bias poses a problem. For example, you might avoid choosing people who live farther away or people in rough neighborhoods. This may take the results unrepresentative of the population. So this is a model of quota sampling where you have seen that from this particular group, from this particular thing, the male population had been taken, and who are in the bracket of 50 years. So anyway, I think I have talked a lot about this random sampling. I have talked a lot about this non-random sampling, and I have very very meticulously explained in the very beginning that sampling is a technique, and it's not like that you can just consider the population or earmark the population or universal, then just extract the data from that particular population. There must be certain modus operandi, there must be certain procedures, there must be certain methods. And when you are going to talk about the methods, I think you have to first see what exactly the sampling is and how you are going to collect the sample, and what could be the modus operandi you are going to do, and what are the ways you are going to apply. Like the non-random sampling you are going to applying, or you are going to apply the probability sampling. But you have to see what exactly the demand comes from as far as a researcher is concerned. So the certain time what we observe that when we are doing our research, I think, and we have taken a population or the universal, or we have earmarked the population, we just to narrow down the research, just to cut short the research, or try to condense the research in a shorter span, we try to follow a fast track mode, or the shortcut methods, which is no way permissible as far as the research is concerned. So being a researcher, you have to be quite elaborative, you have to have a patience, and you have to see that how you are going to do the sampling, because the whole genesis behind the good research is the sample, because the population is something which you have earmarked, or the universal which you have explored. This is something which can give you the boundary, but when you are going to play in that ground or in the boundary, I think there you have to see, because when you enter into the playground, you have to very easily make up your mind that you are going to play cricket today, you are going to play a football, or you are going to play other games. If the intention is not clear in your mind that what exactly you are going to play, I think somewhere you are confused. So and that confusion is going to eradicate once you know about the basic phenomena of the sampling, or the methods of sampling. These sampling techniques are quite vibrant in nature, and it is not like that one sample you have used and you are rigid to that. So sometimes what happens, we start with the random sampling, that is stratified sampling, simple random sampling, or the systematic sampling, or the other way of doing the things. But after certain time we realize that the data is not coming in the manner we have presumed or supposed to be do. So in that case, what exactly you have to do, you have to work as a juggler, which I have told in my preceding session also, that you have to do the things in such a manner that you can jump to the other modes of doing the things. So if you have started the journey with convenience sampling, or the cluster sampling, or the stratified sampling, so because these are the way by which you can able to interpret the particular clusters, or if you talk about the stratified random sampling, you can make certain groups and do the things. But when you move from this convenience sampling to judgmental sampling, somewhere it also helps, because it can give you a different way of doing the things. And on the other hand, what we observe, that you have started with the random sampling, then you have moved to the non-random sampling and apply the snowball sampling. Now the snowball sampling is purely working on the references or to the chain model. So if you interact with few respondents and you ask these respondents to give the details about the other respondents, where you can float your questionnaire, I think this is one of the way by which you can get your access more, and these respondents considered to be the potential respondents. It's not like that you can just moving isolately or exploring the things in in a dark room. You are quite knowing that you are going to do the things, or you are just going to the right researchers or right respondents. So I think this is the beauty of the sampling, and we know that when we start the sampling, when we do the sampling, when we apply certain techniques or methodology, certain errors comes in between, and these errors work as a alarm bell. And once you get the data, and so the modus operandi is like that. Once you have reciprocates, once you have started collecting the data from the respondents in the primary mode, you try to evaluate those data. It's not like that you have a sample size of 400 or 500 and 100 people have reciprocated, then you wait for another 400 and then come to the conclusion. It's not like that. The moment 100 people have reciprocates, you make a small comparative view or of the respondents' reports and try to find out that what exactly the things are coming out. If the results considered to be appreciable, or the results considered to be satisfactory, then you can carry on with that. Otherwise, in between, you have to apply certain other methodologies which can give you a model, which can give you a platform that you reach to a conclusion. So I think this could be the way, and we have to be quite serious when we are in the process of collecting a sample, because if you have collected the sample of 100 respondents and if you have made the comparative view, I think the interpretation could be quite clear that whether you are moving in the right direction, or some other points need to be added in questionnaire which can give you a more elaborative result. So that is where you have to stop yourself, or you have to revamp your questionnaire, and then you have to start your journey. So I think this research, when we talk about the research, when we talk about the research plan, when we talk about the research design, it's not like that you have make the research plan or design in the very beginning. You have to be quite agile, or be active as far as the research process is going on. So every juncture you have to recapitulate yourself. You have to see whether you are moving in a right manner, or what certain things will need to be added or deleted or subtracted, so that you can after certain time you lead to a final conclusion. So anyway, I think we are going to wind up this particular session, which is quite thought-provoking and very important as far as the researcher is concerned, because sampling is very important ingredient, and in the next session we are going to talk about the errors. There are margin of errors, there are statistical errors or sampling errors, and how these sampling errors are working as a alarm bell, and how you are going to come out. Because if you are familiar with the pros and cons, I think the result which you are used to get, it's quite foolproof in nature. So thank you, learners. We will have another sessions in coming days. Thank you.